Hi, my name's Steve Bambury. I'm a certified Faraday chair. My background, the 30-second version of my background, I did an apprenticeship in the Royal New Zealand Navy a bunch of years ago, which gave me discipline and a bunch of really, really close and very good mates. I left the Navy and I got into entrepreneurship. I guess I've always been an entrepreneur. I had my first business when I was 15 years old as a lawn mowing round, and then went and set up my first real business in 1993. So over 33 years, I guess, of in the trenches as an entrepreneur. Some of the hard-fought commercial experiences that you get in business. Got a few some amazing successes. I have sold businesses. I've done multi-million-dollar exits. I've also gone through the process of losing a lot, and got some amazing lessons from losing everything. And I think that that makes you well-rounded. I kind of joke about it and say, well, I've got a chip on both shoulders, right? But it's that experience that you can't necessarily, you can't vicariously live that. So I feel that I've got a lot to contribute. I've got some battle scars. I've been through some really tough times and come through the other side. So, I've got back up after losing everything, and then went and started another venture, 10x that. And like I say, been around for a while, so I've learned some things. Achieved 997% growth over the GFC with an organization, and a lot of that was around having the right mindset and having the resilience and the courage to stand back up again. I've loved studying human behavior, so I've been an advocate of psychology, and more recently certified as a master neuroplastician through the International Organization of Neuroscience. So I guess that combination gives me, I guess, a fairly unique perspective. It's that the intersection of strategy, which Faraday is so good at, and then the neuroscience or the mindset side of it, and you put those two together, and you've got something really special. So that's me in a nutshell. Might have been longer than 30 seconds, but yeah, that's who I am.
And the topic that one of the analogies that you use is talking about the shift from pilot to air traffic controller, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Love that analogy. It's something I picked up from Faraday. The Faraday methodology is absolutely wonderful. I mean, I've been around a long time, developing professional advisory boards, and their philosophies and methodologies are really amazing. So I've been attracted to that, and really proud to be able to bring that to bear. And the air traffic controller is one of the analogies that they talk about. The pilot to the air traffic controller. We can take a deeper dive into that. But taking that step back and orchestrating what you need to have around a business, I think is a great analogy. And it's something that's really important to help leaders to not only grow their organization, but to grow personally and to get back their freedom. Because so many business owners that I've encountered over the years, and having been one myself, have fallen into the same trap, is that you start a business in the belief that it's going to allow you to achieve your goals and your dreams and give you more freedom and give you more income and be able to have more time to do the things that you love. When actually, in the majority of cases, Mark, it's the opposite of that. And we lose our freedom. And we have these terrible statistics around mental health for business owners and leaders, and the impact of that, the loneliness and the depression and the anxiety and the burnout and the stress that comes from owning a business or leading a business, where we think that we've got to be we've got to have the answers for everything, and we don't. So yes, I'm happy to take a deeper dive in that, because it's one of the core philosophies I felt about making a difference for leaders to be able to navigate those complexities and get back their freedom.
Okay, I'll do my quick pause. Hi, welcome to Governance Bites. My name is Mark Banicevich, and as you just heard, I have the pleasure today of spending time with Steve Bambury. Steve, thank you very much for your time. As we've said, the topic today is the shift from pilot to air traffic controller, and you often describe founders as the only ones in the cockpit. At what point does that stop being heroic and start becoming a failure of governance?
Look, I think when when the stresses of life start impacting your life personally. The complexities of business, it's got more complex to run businesses today. There's more volatility, there's more uncertainty, there's greater complexity in business. And heroism is great if you want to think that you've got to be the person with all of the answers. And I think that some organizations, some leaders feel that they have to have all of the answers when they actually don't.
Mm.
So that heroism really impacts us in a negative way, in both our ability to grow an organization and grow our business, but the personal impact on ourselves at a mindset space. We have sleepless nights. We worry about things that we don't know answers to. We have these terrible statistics, as I was saying earlier, Mark, around mental health,
Mhm.
around stress, anxiety, depression as business leaders, because we're carrying all of that weight and trying to do so many things. So to answer your question, I think when those things start impacting us, um, at that point, they manifest themselves physically. We have illnesses that come from that as a result, but then it impacts those people around us.
Yes.
Because as an individual, we've got a community. We've got our loved ones, we've got our husbands and our wives and our sons and our daughters and our mothers and our fathers around us. And when we're under pressure and when we are suffering from those stresses, then that impacts everything. So I think,
Yes.
that's really when it starts having a bigger impact on both ourselves and our loved ones around us.
Right.
And our ability, we lose our freedom.
Yes.
We've
Yep.
got the sense of the way through this is just to work harder.
Mm.
I'll double down on the hours that I'm putting into the business. I'll start earlier and I'll finish later. And then all of a sudden you wake up and the kids are leaving home and you realize that you really have lost that relationship that you thought you were going to have.
Yes. Yeah. You talk about an advisory board as air traffic control and the owner of the business is the pilot. What are the core functions of an air traffic control advisory board?
Great question. Look, I think you've got to have knowledge, obviously. So it's putting around you those people that have got the knowledge and experience relative to where the business is going. When you understand the direction you want to get to, and what is your big goal that you're heading towards, and then break that down into bite-sized chunks. What do we need to have around us? Well, that's the air traffic controller is managing that. I love the analogy that Dan Sullivan talks about. Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. Um, and I'll give him credit for the concept of who, not how. We don't need to know how to do everything. We just need to know who are our best hows. So I think as the air traffic controller, it's around putting those people around us that know a lot more about certain things that we need to have within that business environment, taking us in that direction that we want to be going and bringing those people in. So the ability to understand what we need to develop that strategy and then understanding who we need to have on that journey with us, I think is really important. Skills, experience are important. Without that experience, you can't deeply learn stuff from a textbook. There's certain things you can pick up, absolutely, but it's that experience, that worldwide experience of having gone through challenges and successes and experience all across the board.
There's going to be a large portion here of self-awareness too, of knowing what you're good at and what you're not, and identifying those gaps and what the business needs and what you aren't an expert at, and having the courage to stand up and say, I'm going to bring some expertise in this area so that we can do this better than I can alone.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. I mean, when you look at, what do you need to have from a business point of view or a leader's point of view to be able to take on board an advisory board? I look for three key attributes. One of them is desire. You've got to have desire for growth. And look, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of CEOs, business owners, founders, and leaders, and I don't think there's too many of them that don't have a desire to grow. They've started a business, they want to make a difference. So desire is, fairly commonplace.
Hmm.
But the second element of that is commitment. Have they got the commitment to do what it takes? And I see a lot of leaders that don't really deeply understand what it takes to get to that goal that they're after. You can sit here and say, I want to climb Mount Everest. It's right there, but there's a little thing in the way called the Hillary step. You got to get past that. And before you do that, you've got to get into the gym. How much time are you prepared to do that before you go and climb your mountain?
Mm.
And that desire and that commitment sometimes are mismatched. So you've got to understand the ability of the leader to have the commitment to do what it takes.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's back to what you're talking about. We go, well, have you got the ability to accept that there are things that you don't know, and you're prepared to let go of those
Mm.
things and bring people around you and take that advice? Because if you can't take advice and you feel that you've got all the answers, then yeah, an advisory board is not going to be right for you.
Yes. If we go back to that concept of the air traffic control, what capabilities or perspectives are essential in that room to avoid the blind spots that founders may have?
Uh, Look, I think it comes back to strategy first,
Hmm.
understanding the strategy that you've got and where you want to be going, and then from there breaking that down into understanding from the organization's perspective what internal capabilities do they have and what is the gap? What
Yes.
is the gap between where they're going, where they are now, what capabilities they've got, and then understanding who we're going to bring in
Mm.
service to those goals that we have. So I think that's a really important aspect. And then you touched on something before, communication. For me, it's not just communication, it's courageous communication, courageous honesty, and being able to tell people the truth of the situation, even though it might be hard to say and difficult for them to hear. I believe that people deserve that heartfelt, honest communication and feedback so that we can then make decisions in the around it.
Right. Yes. What systems or processes turn that insight that you get from the boardroom into coordinated action rather than just having a conversation that's very interesting?
Yeah, it is a great question. Again, I think once you understand where you're going, the direction that you're taking, and Faraday have got a beautiful model around that. They talk about the three horizons. Your big goal, then you break that back down, and that might be 2, 3, 5 years from now, and you
Yes.
break that back down into your it might be your 2-year horizon or your 12-month horizon, depends how fast you want to go, and then you come down to horizon one. So each of those horizons is heading towards that third horizon. Well, once you understand that, you've got your strategy in place, you know the skills and experience that you need, and then you look at that and go, okay, so how are we going to know that we're successful when we're going there, and how are we going to measure that? And that comes back down to measuring the right activities and then having a framework of accountability.
Right.
So the right metrics in service to where you want to be going, and then that accountability, I think, is the way to, I believe is the way to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. You mentioned one of the things you mentioned before was the founders' control of the organization, and initially they're in charge of everything, and many founders struggle to relinquish that control. What does letting go look like in governance terms?
Um, Accepting that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, that you don't have to have all the answers, I think is fundamentally important to that conversation. We often as leaders think that we need to know everything, where we don't. So I think that is one of the biggest things to do, to let go and then hand the reins over to those people that we've elected to bring around us because they've been brought in to fill a role. They've been brought in to fill a gap of skills and experience that we don't have and being prepared to let go.
And one of the features of an advisory board as well, right, is that the founder's not actually relinquishing the decision-making power. They're bringing in expertise, having discussions, and then still having the final say. It's not unless they move into a formal governance board where you've got directors that are formally positioned as directors. At that stage, they're actually handing over some of the control of that decision-making. They don't have complete control anymore.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and they serve different functions. Your governance board is there for a reason, and it's an important reason. They're looking at the fiduciary responsibilities. They're looking at that governance perspective from a compliance and a legislative point of view, and that's really important. An advisory board is doing that. They're providing advice. They're providing their worldly experience and their advice on the subject matters that they were brought in to do. That decision still rests with the owner. Might go back to the governance, the traditional governance board to
Mm.
make a decision in that regard.
Right, right. When a founder does assemble an advisory board, what is the risk that they might assemble a board that just reinforces what they already think?
Oh, look, that's another great question, Mark, because we all too often want to bring around us people that are like us. You know, consciously and subconsciously we do that. And the danger with that is if we bring around us people that are exactly the same as us, then we're going to have blind spots.
Mm,
So it's important from an advisory board perspective that we understand where those blind spots are. We need to understand the felt truths and the assumptions that an organization's carrying because we all carry them. And organizations carry them. They have assumptions about the way that they think the world is because of the worldly experience they've had up until that point.
yes.
And part of the role of the chair, part of the role of the advisory board is to challenge those assumptions. And we can challenge those assumptions in many ways. We can challenge them through experience and skills. We can challenge them through data. I mean, data is a wonderful way to challenge that. You know, that felt belief. We think that's right. It's how we've always done it, but actually, is it? And then when you
Yes.
start pulling it apart and you start putting some numbers around, you go, oh, actually, well, hmm, maybe I was making an assumption here. Maybe that felt belief isn't correct.
Mm. Well, one of the other things that you mentioned before was the concept of measuring success. How should success be measured for an advisory board that is future focused?
Look, I guess it really depends on where the business is heading. There are a number of success metrics that we can bring to play into an organization. And it really depends on the goals and the you know where you're heading. So there are a multiple number of ways of doing it. And I think it's important as an advisory board to be have a good hard look at how we're going to measure that success so that we know when we get there, how we're going to measure success. So we've got a framework of accountability
Mm.
to are we just, to your point earlier, are we just having a lovely conversation and reinforcing a felt truth, or are we really challenging it and measuring the things that matter?
Yes.
Because I often see organizations that are measuring the wrong things or have got the wrong assumptions and have ultimately got their ladder up against the wrong fence. They're climbing the wrong wall.
Yeah, it's nice analogy. Actually, on that point of analogies, I've read somewhere where you've described shifting the brain of the company off the founder's shoulders. So we're talking then about distributing that intelligence. What does distributed intelligence look like in practice?
But look, again, I think that distributed intelligence is an interesting way to look at it, Mark. You know, we've got to, again, we come back to the simplicities of it, understanding the gaps, understanding where we want to be going, and understanding what intelligence, if you like, that we need to bring into that. And then we distribute it. Now, we can distribute it at an advisory board level,
Hmm.
uh, and that distributed intelligence may be required for a short period of time for a specific project. We may be looking at a merger or an acquisition, and we don't have the capabilities and the experience in-house. So therefore, we need to bring that in, and we have that intelligence is now in the room. We can share that as an advisory board level. We can
Yes.
make some really, really good decisions in service to what we're trying to achieve. And then once we've achieved it and we've measured our success and we've hit our numbers of what we want to do, then that advisor can step aside. Alternatively, if that intelligence should sit within an organization where it's a gap that you have, but it's something that you need on an ongoing basis, then we have a different role. We may
Mm.
bring an advisor in that's got that relative skill, that relative experience, and then we share that intelligence and that knowledge within an organization and have it retain in the organization. So we're building our own redundancy as either advisors or as a chair for that organization.
Right. Yes. I mentioned before around this, the concept of an advisory board and how the founder or the owners are still making fundamentally the decisions. In practice, where do you draw that line between giving advice and the authority for decision making?
Well, I think to the point you made earlier, that there's the company with typically with the founder, um, the leader, the owner of the organization. Those decisions rest with them. So we give advice and we can share experience, um, and they have the choice to make at that point of time. I think going back to the point that we made really, really early is that if they've got the right growth mindset and they're prepared to take that advice and listen to it and accept that there are things that they don't know, then it makes it easy for them to make that decision to be able to go, okay, great. I'm gonna make that decision. I'm going to listen to that advice because I recognize that I don't have that skill or experience to make that decision on my own.
Right.
Uh, but ultimately, the decision does rest with them.
Yes. And how does that then work in practice when you've got your advisors sitting around the room, you're having you're debating a very important topic and a decision needs to be made, and the owner ultimately makes the decision. How is that happening in the room, and how is that then minuted so that you as advisory board chair, for example, don't fall into the trap of becoming a deemed director because you've been involved in this decision making? How does that actually work in practice?
Yeah, look, great question. You provide the advice, the decisions made, and you document it accordingly. So you've got well documented minutes that come back out from the meetings that you've got, and your advice is documented, and then the decision is made accordingly. Because you're quite right. We're not taking a traditional director's role in
Mm.
that sense. So we've got to be mindful that we don't become shadow directors as a result.
Indeed, indeed. How should that role of advisory board evolve as the company scales or becomes more professional or evolves?
Yeah, again, I think that comes back, Mark, to the three horizons. You've got that big goal that you're heading towards,
Yes,
and then that's your horizon three. Your horizon two is taking you in that direction. So there will be things in horizon three that like I say, those big goals in Horizon 2, then there will be some things that you're doing that are taking you in that direction. Horizon 1, which is going to be much shorter frame, again, it's got to be taking you in that direction. So as you're moving through and the business is growing and achieving its goals, then Horizon 1 ultimately drifts away. You might have a new Horizon 3 and Horizon 2 becomes Horizon 1. So the things that you're in service to achieving in your growth objectives determine what skill, what expertise, what levers that you need to pull on the way through.
and that flexibility of the advisory board model is where some value gets added there, right? As you say, you need for expertise can change through those horizons. So
Yes,
somebody may exit the board and somebody else comes on, and that's very fluid in that respect. Where a formal governance board, the terms are a little bit more rigid quite often, and the changeover points are a little bit more structured.
yes, yeah.
What's the hardest mindset shift founders need to make to get real value from this?
Uh, I think being prepared to let go,
Hmm.
being prepared to accept that they don't have to be the smartest person in the room, being prepared to accept that advice. I think the hardest thing is letting go and delegating,
Yes.
and accepting that in that delegation process that you don't have to get it 100%. Someone if you're a founder and you're really good at everything, but you can't do everything as the business grows, then you've got to be prepared to delegate, to let go and let someone else uh, fail to some extent.
Yes.
But failure is not a bad thing,
Mm.
so long as you're doing it with some guardrails around it. You don't want to be reckless and cavalier with it.
Yes.
But if you're delegating, and you've got to let people make those mistakes because there are great lessons from that. And
And
if
is
those
it
mistakes happen to involve other people, then you've got to have that courageous honesty and put your hand up and take responsibility and then communicate really well.
right? Yeah. And you raised another great distinction there. It's, we've talked earlier today about founders lacking the capability in some areas. And the example you just gave wasn't a lack of capability, it was a lack of capacity, where they may actually know how to do these things, but they still don't have the capacity to do everything and need to hand some stuff off to get things done. Yeah,
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you. I've got one final question for you, which is very general. In your career, what's the best governance advice you've received?
Oh, that's a great question. The best governance advice I've received, um, I guess, has been prepared to accept that people aren't going to necessarily do things as well as what you can. Being prepared to, like we were just talking, being prepared to let go and being prepared to support other people, but but be there for them, to let it go, to let them take it over, and let them fail forward if
Right.
they need to.
Great. Steve, that's been really cool. Thank you so much for your time. I'll look forward to catching up again soon. And we'll see you next episode.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.